My name is Lauren Maddox, and this is the story of how one text message shattered everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and family. It was a sunny Sunday morning in late September. The kind where the autumn light spills in through the windows just right, and you feel a rare moment of peace before the week begins. I was curled up on the couch, with a cup of coffee scrolling through photos from a client's successful product launch, when my phone buzzed with a new text from my mother. It read, "You weren't invited to dinner. Kyle's girlfriend isn't comfortable around you." At first I thought I misread it. I stared at the screen, rereading the message again and again, willing the words to rearrange themselves into something less brutal. But they didn't. They just sat there. Cold, sharp, final. My mom. The woman I had spent years supporting financially and emotionally. The same woman I once surprised by paying off her entire mortgage on Christmas morning. And Kyle, my younger brother, my childhood sidekick, apparently agreed with this decision to exclude me, for the comfort of a woman he had been dating for less than a year. My stomach dropped. My hands went numb. And in that moment, something in me shifted. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't even respond right away. Instead, I opened my laptop, pulled up the financial folders tied to the family business I had built with them, and started clicking. But before I tell you what I did next and how I walked away from a 3-year, $310,000 investment in the people who told me I didn't belong at their dinner table, let me take you back. Back to where it started, not the betrayal, but the bond, the history, the love I thought was unbreakable. I was born and raised in Burlington, Vermont, not the postcard version with the cute shops and maple syrup, but the more worn-down side of town where families worked 3 jobs just to keep food on the table. I was the firstborn type A from the crib, according to my mother. Kyle came 4 years later and became my shadow before he could even walk. I taught him how to ride a bike, quizzed him before every spelling test, and stood up for him when some high school punk knocked his lunch tray over in the cafeteria. We were close, the kind of close where you finish each other's sentences and laugh at jokes no one else understands. But even back then, our parents had a double standard. For me, it was always about achievement. Straight A's, perfect attendance scholarships. For Kyle, the bar was lower. He's just figuring it out, they'd say, when he skipped class or dropped out of his 3rd college major. I didn't resent it. Not really. I was proud to be the one they could count on, the one who made them proud, the one who got things done. I went to Boston University on a full scholarship, interned for top consulting firms, and by 30, I had launched my own agency. It wasn't just successful, it was thriving. I had clients across the country, a staff of 10, and a gorgeous loft downtown with views of the harbor. I was by any measurable standard living the dream. But what mattered most to me, that I could finally give back to my family, that I could be the one to give them security after everything they sacrificed for us. So when my parents told me about their dream to open a restaurant using my grandmother's old recipes, a small Italian bistro in the neighborhood where they met, I didn't hesitate. I wrote the first check without blinking. Over the next 3 years, I poured more than money into that place. I gave them my time, my expertise, my weekends, and my heart. I branded the restaurant, hired the executive chef, designed the kitchen, and ran the finances. I turned it into a local gem. Wilson's was our pride, until it wasn't ours anymore. That text wasn't just about one dinner. It was a declaration that I didn't matter, that someone else's discomfort, someone who hadn't spent a single hour building that restaurant, was more important than my presence, that I was disposable, replaceable. And in that moment, I stopped being the daughter who always said yes. I texted back one word, "Okay," but what I meant was, this was the last time you'll get to decide who I am to this family. My earliest memories of Kyle were always warm. He was the wide-eyed little boy with jelly on his cheeks and a laugh that could crack the air open. I was the big sister who held his hand on the first day of school, who made his Halloween costumes, who stayed up late helping him memorize the names of the planets for his third-grade science fair. If you had asked me back then whether I'd ever walk away from him, I would have laughed. He was my little brother, my person. Growing up, our home was far from perfect, but it was filled with love, or so I believed. My dad, a mechanic, worked long hours, and my mom waited tables at a diner just off the interstate. Money was tight, but birthdays were never missed, and traditions were sacred. Friday night pizza, Sunday spaghetti dinners. I think that's why the restaurant felt so meaningful to all of us. It was a way to preserve something beautiful from a past that had often been chaotic. I remember the night my parents told me about their dream to open a restaurant. We were sitting around the dinner table in their modest kitchen plates, scraped clean wine glasses half full. My dad cleared his throat and slid a wrinkled brochure across the table. "There's a spot for sale down on Maple and Fifth. It's run down, sure. But with a little elbow grease?" My mom jumped in, eyes bright. "We'd use Nana's recipes. Make it feel like home, you know, family style. Real food, real heart." I looked at them and I saw more than a pipe dream. I saw decades of hard work of putting everyone else first finally culminating in something they wanted for themselves. I saw two people who had never asked for anything but finally dared to hope. The next day, I ran the numbers. The asking price wasn't outrageous, but it was more than they could afford. Their credit wasn't strong enough for a loan, and their savings would barely cover half the costs. I had the capital. More importantly, I had the business acumen to make it work. When I offered to invest, my parents were hesitant. "It's too much, Lauren," my dad said. "It wouldn't feel right." But I insisted. "This isn't a handout. It's a partnership. I believe in this and I believe in you." Eventually, they agreed. We shook hands at that same kitchen table, the deal sealed with spaghetti sauce on my dad's sleeve and tears in my mom's eyes. That night, I started drafting a full-scale business plan, renovation costs, marketing projections, menu development. I brought in a designer to revamp the space, hired a top-tier chef who had worked in upscale Italian kitchens, and launched a branding campaign that captured the essence of what we were building: comfort food with soul. We named it Maddox & Co. The soft opening was magical. We filled the restaurant with friends, family, and curious locals. I watched my mom beam as she handed out plates of baked ziti. I watched my dad give tours of the kitchen like it was his new garage, and Kyle, he was in awe. "This is amazing," he said, arms open, spinning in the middle of the dining room. "I feel like we're building something real." At the time, Kyle was freshly graduated from college with a general business degree and no real direction. So I made space for him too. I gave him the title of floor manager, set him up with training manuals, helped him learn the ropes. I wanted him to feel empowered, not just included, but essential. For the first year, things were good. Maddox and Cohen started turning heads. We were featured in the local food blog circuit, and people began driving from out of town just to try our Sunday lasagna. Revenue was up 35% by year 2. We even began discussions about expanding to a second location. Behind the scenes, though, I handled everything: payroll, vendor negotiations, health inspections, customer service protocols. Every Monday, we held meetings where I presented reports, projections, and strategy updates. My parents were engaged. Kyle was trying. He showed up late sometimes, skipped meetings occasionally, but I chalked it up to growing pains. He was learning. He had potential. Then came Amanda. Kyle introduced her at one of our Sunday dinners. She was polished, poised, and professional. A hospitality background, she said. Experience in event management. My parents were instantly smitten. I tried to be welcoming. I complimented her earrings. She laughed at my dad's corny jokes. When she offered a few marketing suggestions, I even told her they were interesting. But something about her felt performative, calculated. Still, I didn't say anything. Kyle looked happy, and that mattered. If I had known that night would be the beginning of the end, that Amanda's arrival would slowly chip away at everything I'd built, I would have paid closer attention to how easily she inserted herself into the center of our family. But hindsight, as always, is heartbreak's cruelest companion. In the months that followed, Amanda became more than just Kyle's girlfriend. She became a fixture. At first, her presence felt helpful. She offered to coordinate a holiday wine tasting at the restaurant, which went over surprisingly well with the younger crowd. She suggested adding a brunch menu on Saturdays, and revenue spiked 10% that quarter. I even complimented her initiative during one of our Monday meetings. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, at first, things began to shift. It started with her attending our management meetings not just as Kyle's +1, but as a participant. "She has some great ideas," Kyle said when I gave him a puzzled look the first time she chimed in. "Just let her sit in." I didn't argue. After all, Amanda did seem to know the hospitality industry. I figured a fresh perspective couldn't hurt. But the more she showed up, the more I started to notice a pattern. Every suggestion I made was now up for debate. Every data-driven recommendation was greeted with a counter-opinion from Amanda. When I presented numbers showing that our dinner service had been slowing down, I proposed adjusting the staff schedule and investing in a new training protocol. Amanda cut in smoothly. "I think the issue is your reservation software. It's outdated. At the Fairmont, we used a system that doubled our turnover." I tried to explain that our current system was tailored to our size and customer base, but my dad was already nodding. "Amanda might be right," he said, scratching his head. "Maybe we're falling behind." The problem wasn't just that Amanda had ideas, it was that they were now being prioritized over mine, and not based on merit, but on charm, influence, proximity. The following week, Amanda wasn't at the meeting. I brought up the same data, same conclusions, same suggestions. This time, my parents agreed immediately. I remember sitting there afterward feeling invisible, and that was just the beginning. Soon after, I showed up at Maddox & Coda's one afternoon and noticed that the dining room had been rearranged. The intimate four-top tables I had carefully chosen were replaced with long, communal-style ones. "What happened here?" I asked my mom, gesturing to the new layout. "Oh, Amanda thought it would create a more social atmosphere," she said brightly. "More like an authentic Italian family experience." I didn't argue. I just did the math. We had lost 12 seats per service. That meant dozens of customers lost per weekend. Thousands in potential revenue gone. All for an aesthetic Amanda decided on without a single conversation with me. At home, I stewed in silence. I wasn't angry about the tables. I was angry about what they represented. A slow erosion of my voice, my role, my value. And it wasn't just the restaurant. Kyle was slipping away too. Our Sunday sibling brunches canceled. Our inside jokes gone. When we did speak, he seemed guarded, defensive, like he was bracing for a fight that I wasn't even starting. Then came the first true punch to the gut. I found out from Chef Ray that my family had gone scouting for a second restaurant location without me. "I figured you already knew," Ray said, confused. "Amanda led the whole walkthrough. She said you were too tied up with corporate clients to join." I had never said that. Never even been told about it. I checked social media. There it was, a photo of my parents, Kyle and Amanda, smiling outside a storefront with the caption, "Dreaming big things for Maddox & Comber 2.0. I sat at my desk staring at that photo, my stomach twisting. They were making expansion plans without the person who had made the original restaurant possible. Without the person who had put her career, her finances, her weekends, her entire heart into this. What hurt most wasn't the secrecy. It was the ease with which they excluded me. When I tried to talk to my parents about it, my mom waved it off. "Amanda's just excited," she said. "She's been a real help lately, and Kyle trusts her instincts." "And you don't trust mine anymore?" I asked. She paused for a beat. "Of course we do. It's just, sometimes your way feels a little rigid." Rigid. That word echoed in my head for days. I, who had built the entire foundation of this business, was now the rigid one, the obstacle, the outsider. And yet I kept hoping it would pass, that they'd come to their senses, that Kyle would remember who stood beside him every step of his life, that my parents would see Amanda for who she was, a woman slowly replacing me in their world, one dinner shift, one meeting, one manipulated narrative at a time. But if hope is a rope, mine was fraying fast. By the 6th month of Amanda's presence in our lives, it was no longer a matter of if something was wrong, it was a matter of how deep the damage had gone. I remember walking into the restaurant one morning with my usual binder full of numbers, only to find Amanda already seated in the office chair where I usually prepared. Her laptop was open, a presentation deck glowing on the screen. "Oh," she said, without looking up. "Were we meeting today?" She knew we were. We always met on Mondays, but apparently that tradition, like so many others, had become optional for everyone except me. I tried to stay professional. I presented a detailed analysis of the dip in our loyalty metrics and outlined a plan to bring back regulars through targeted promotions. Amanda glanced over my spreadsheet and smiled like someone indulging a child's drawing. "That's nice," she said sweetly, "but Jason and I already moved forward with a summer marketing plan. It's more modern." The word modern clung to my throat like smoke. Their plan, as it turned out, was flashy but completely unsustainable. They wanted to run daily promotions, launch influencer nights, and add expensive new dishes that didn't reflect our brand identity at all. When I pointed out that the projected costs exceeded our marketing budget by 40%, Amanda's smile vanished. "Just because it wasn't your idea doesn't make it wrong," she said flatly. I looked at Kyle, expecting backup. Instead, he leaned forward, arms crossed. "Amanda has actually worked in restaurants, Lauren, not just behind spreadsheets." That stung. Never mind that my spreadsheets had turned their dream into reality. Never mind that I had never taken a paycheck. Never mind that every single vendor contract, every employee handbook, every social media strategy carried my fingerprints. They were treating me like the intruder, but nothing prepared me for what came next. The restaurant hosted our parents' 35th wedding anniversary party. It was a big deal, the kind of celebration we used to plan together down to the napkin colors and playlist. But this time, I wasn't invited. I found out 2 days later when one of the waitresses mentioned how lovely the private party had been. "You must have been slammed," she said, laughing. "But your mom looked gorgeous. And Amanda really nailed the decorations." My heart thudded. "I wasn't there," I said slowly. The waitress blinked. "Oh, I thought she said you were working with a client." "I called my mother that evening." She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice chipper, but strained. "We kept it small," she explained, guilt creeping into her tone. "Just immediate family and a few close friends." "I'm not immediate family," I asked, my voice trembling. "Of course you are, honey. It's just..." Amanda handled everything, and she only booked the smaller room. There wasn't space. There wasn't space for me in the restaurant I helped build, in the family I thought I belonged to. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just sat there after the call, feeling like a ghost in my own life. Later that week, I noticed something alarming in the books. New vendors, unauthorized liquor orders, expenses I couldn't trace. When I confronted Kyle about it, he shrugged. "Amanda's been helping me streamline operations," he said. Streamline? The costs were ballooning. When I brought it up in the next meeting, the only one that actually happened that month, Amanda leaned back in her chair and said with a fake chuckle, "Lauren just likes to feel in control." It's adorable, really. Mom laughed nervously. Dad avoided my eyes. I didn't recognize these people anymore. 3 more meetings were canceled. One week I arrived to an empty office. The next, Amanda was the only one there, sitting in my chair, sipping an oat milk latte like she owned the place. "Oh, didn't Kyle tell you?" she asked with wide, innocent eyes. "Everyone's out today." Something came up. Something always did. Even our regular customers noticed. Margaret Fleming, one of our first weekly patrons, pulled me aside one evening. "Something's off, Lauren," she whispered. "The food's different. The staff seems rushed. And they were out of your grandmother's tiramisu last week. Said they were testing some new deconstructed version. It wasn't good. I thanked her and checked the kitchen. Sure enough, Amanda had replaced the menu dessert with some minimalist blob on a slate plate. The kind of thing that photographs well but tastes like disappointment. I wanted to scream, but screaming doesn't change minds that have already decided you're the problem. So I did what I always did, documented everything. I backed up receipts, tracked changes, reviewed contracts, created timelines, because I knew I felt it deep in my gut that something bigger was coming. And I needed to be ready. The breaking point didn't come in a fiery explosion. It came in silence. The kind of silence that hollows out your chest and echoes for days. It was a Sunday morning, the kind we used to reserve for family brunches and catching up on life. I texted my mom like I always did before a family dinner, looking forward to tonight. Should I bring wine or dessert? No reply. I waited. An hour passed. Then another. At 10:23 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was a single text message. You weren't invited to dinner. Kyle's girlfriend doesn't like you. Just like that. No punctuation. No explanation. Just a decision made behind my back, communicated in a way that told me I wasn't worth a phone call, let alone respect. I stared at the screen for what felt like forever. My stomach dropped. My throat went dry. I tried calling her. Straight to voicemail. Then came another text, this time from Kyle Sam. Please don't make this harder. Amanda feels uncomfortable around you. It's her special night. Just let her have it without any tension. Her special night, I didn't even know what they were celebrating. I typed, "What are you talking about? We discussed this dinner on Tuesday." My mom's response came minutes later. "It's Amanda's engagement dinner. She doesn't want any negativity." Kyle agrees. "Maybe next time." Engagement dinner. I wasn't just being excluded from dinner. I was being deliberately erased from a family milestone. My little brother, the boy who once begged me to sleep in his room after watching a scary movie, was getting engaged, and I wasn't even considered worthy of attendance. And the reason? Because someone who'd been in his life for 8 months didn't feel comfortable with me. As if reading my mind, another message arrived from Kyle. "You're always judging her, questioning her choices. This is about you always needing control. Just give us this one night." And finally, the worst one, from my dad. "We love you, but you need to respect Jason and Amanda's wishes. Sometimes family means supporting someone else's happiness even if it's uncomfortable." There it was. 3 separate texts, 3 separate betrayals. Each one carving deeper into the belief I had held onto, that my sacrifices, my loyalty, my love, meant something. Apparently they didn't. I didn't respond immediately. My body felt like it had shut down. I sat in the stillness of my apartment, hearing nothing but the sound of my own breath. The engagement dinner was happening. Right then. In the restaurant I helped build. At the table I picked out. Under the lights I had installed. They were celebrating a future without me. And I was watching it unfold in real time, not as a participant, but as an outsider, a stranger, a liability. When I finally moved, it wasn't out of spite. It was clarity. Pure, bitter clarity. I opened my laptop and logged into the restaurant's cloud account. There, under neatly labeled folders, were the lifeblood of Maddox & Cobra's 101 separate financial records, invoices, marketing schedules, vendor agreements, payroll top-offs, insurance renewals. Every one of them paid for or managed by me. I selected them all. One by one, I backed them up to a private encrypted cloud, then deleted them from the shared drive. Next, I logged into my bank and canceled every recurring payment tied to the business. The subscription for the reservation software, gone. The equipment maintenance contract canceled. The monthly marketing budget terminated. Each click felt like cutting a cord, not out of vengeance but out of necessity. Because I finally realized this wasn't a partnership anymore. It hadn't been for months. This was emotional gaslighting wrapped in the illusion of family. My phone lit up again. More texts, more calls. I didn't read them. Instead, I called my attorney Camille. "I need your help," I said, my voice strangely calm. "Lauren, what's going on?" "I want to initiate a formal withdrawal from Maddox and Cocarn, protect my investment. I'm done." Camille paused for a beat. She had warned me months ago about the dangers of investing without a binding agreement, but to her credit, she didn't say, "I told you so." "I'll draft the paperwork immediately," she said gently. "Secure your documentation. And Lauren, I'm sorry." I ended the call and stared at my computer. 3 years. Over $310,000, hundreds of unpaid hours, sleepless nights, strategy decks, vendor negotiations, menu consultations, loyalty programs. Every ounce of goodwill I had poured into that restaurant, into my family, now reduced to a transaction I had to legally untangle myself from. And the saddest part, I wasn't even angry. I was numb. The next morning, the calls started coming in. Not from my parents or Kyle, those I had already blocked, but from unknown numbers, burner phones, the restaurant line. The first voicemail was from my dad. "Lauren, the reservation system says our account is deactivated. What the hell is going on? We have customers trying to book for the weekend." Then my mom. "The photographer just canceled the menu shoot. She said her contract was with you personally. We don't even have updated photos for the website, Lauren." And finally, a text from Kyle that bounced between rage and panic. "You're punishing us because you got your feelings hurt. Grow up, Lauren. This is people's livelihoods you're messing with." That line stopped me cold. People's livelihoods. For 3 years, I had protected those livelihoods, paid staff out of my own pocket during slow seasons, covered vendor delays, provided bonuses at Christmas, never once asked for anything in return, not even a thank you. But now I was the villain, the vindictive sister who was too emotional to be trusted. Amanda's message came later that day. It was theatrical. "I hope you're proud of yourself. Your childish reaction to one dinner has caused chaos for everyone. Jason is devastated. Your parents blame me, which is exactly what you wanted. This financial hostage-taking is beyond petty. Be an adult." I didn't reply. What would be the point? Amanda hadn't just taken my place at the table, she'd rewritten the script entirely. She was the victim. I was the controlling, bitter investor who just couldn't let go. And in that narrative, any protest I made would only reinforce her point. So I focused on the next step: legal protection. Camille delivered the settlement draft on Friday. It was clean, firm, fair. I would relinquish all ownership in Maddox and Cocarn in exchange for $250,000 over 5 years, significantly less than I had invested, but enough to establish consequences while allowing the restaurant to survive. A financial and symbolic severing. "You're being generous," Camille said. "Too generous." "I'm not trying to destroy them," I replied. "I just want out." We sent the documents via courier to the restaurant on Monday, along with a personal note I spent 3 hours writing and 2 minutes sealing in an envelope. "This represents a clean break and a fair resolution. The reduced amount is the last gift I will offer. Please don't contact me unless it's through legal counsel." The fallout was immediate. My dad bypassed the blocked number by calling Camille's office directly. "She can't be serious," he told her. "We can't meet those payment terms. The restaurant will go under." Camille relayed the call to me. I stayed quiet for a long moment before replying. "They always said we were a family business. Let them figure out how to run it like one." 2 days later, their attorney submitted a counteroffer, $150,000 over 7 years, with a 6-month deferment before the first payment. Camille's advice was clear: reject it. But I didn't. I accepted it with one condition. They must agree to mandatory financial counseling with a licensed advisor for the first 12 months. Camille raised an eyebrow. "You still want to teach them?" "No," I said. "I just want to stop them from failing again, at least not because of ignorance." The agreement was signed the following week. I didn't attend the signing. Camille went in my place. According to her, my parents looked haggard. Kyle was pale and distant. Amanda wasn't there. As news of my departure circulated in the local restaurant community, I began receiving quiet messages of support. Chef Ray texted me, "They're not doing great, Lauren. Without you, the structure's collapsing. They don't understand systems. Orders are delayed. Staff morale is low." I thanked him, but I didn't ask for details. I didn't want updates. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood that caring didn't require my presence. I had spent years believing that love meant sacrifice, that loyalty meant silence, that family meant staying even when staying broke me. Now I knew better. I knew that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and even for them is leave. And that walking away isn't giving up. It's growing up. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of quiet. Of no voicemails, no late-night texts, no Instagram updates with Amanda front and center pretending to be the visionary behind a business I had built from the ground up. It was strange at first, almost like surfacing from a storm. The silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt empty. Then unexpectedly, an email arrived. From Kyle Maddox, subject: "We broke up." There was no greeting, no small talk. Just the words. "Amanda and I ended things. She left when the money got tight. Said she didn't sign up for a failing business. You were right about her. I'm sorry I didn't see it." I stared at the message for a long time. I reread it twice. There was no apology for the way he'd treated me, no acknowledgement of the years of exclusion or the messages that told me I didn't belong at my own family's table. Just regret about Amanda, not about everything else. I didn't respond, because sometimes silence isn't avoidance, it's protection. A few days later, the first settlement payment arrived in my business account. Attached was a handwritten note from my mother. "We miss you more than words can say. The restaurant means nothing without you. Please give us a chance to make this right." I read it once and filed it away. I didn't throw it out, but I didn't reply either. I had learned my lesson. Camille, my attorney, warned me early on. This isn't just a financial disengagement, it's emotional surgery. You're not just cutting cords, you're cutting illusions. She was right. Because I'd been operating under a fantasy that if I just gave enough, gave money, time, forgiveness, love, I could earn my place in the family, that I could somehow force them to see me, to value me, to choose me. But families don't work like that, at least not healthy ones. A month passed. I focused on my consulting business. It was booming. Without the restaurant draining my energy, I had the clarity and bandwidth to expand. I hired 2 new associates, onboarded 3 major clients, and doubled our projected annual revenue. But even as I succeeded, I still felt the weight of the grief. So I did something I should have done much earlier. I found a therapist. Her name was Dr. Marshall. Kind eyes, no-nonsense demeanor, and the kind of patience that makes you feel safe unraveling in front of someone. At our second session, she said something that shifted everything for me. "Lauren, you're not just mourning a relationship. You're mourning the version of your family you believed existed." It hit me hard, because that was exactly it. I wasn't just grieving the betrayal. I was grieving the illusion, the belief that my parents would always choose me, that Kyle would always be my little brother, that love in and of itself would be enough. But love without respect is manipulation, and family without accountability is dysfunction. I told Dr. Marshall I didn't want to hate them, that despite everything I still had love for them, that I still dreamed of a version of us where we could sit at a table and just talk honestly, gently, without all the unspoken resentments between us. Then maybe, she said, it's time to invite them into a space where truth is possible. I knew what she meant, so I drafted an email. One I rewrote 5 times before pressing send. To Mom, Dad, Kyle, subject: next step. I am not ready for personal contact, but I am open to a mediated conversation with a licensed family therapist present to discuss what happened and whether any future relationship is possible. This is not a promise of reconciliation. It's a request for honesty, boundaries, and clarity. Let me know if you're willing. Lauren. Their reply came within hours. 3 separate messages, all saying yes. Yes to therapy. Yes to honesty. Yes to trying, not as a family that pretended nothing had happened, but as people finally willing to confront the truth. It wasn't reconciliation, not yet. But it was a beginning. The family therapy session was scheduled for a Friday afternoon 3:00 p.m. in a neutral office just outside of town. I arrived 15 minutes early, palms damp, heart pounding. Even after all this time, after lawyers and settlements and silence facing them still made something old and bruised ache inside me. I was the first to arrive. The waiting room smelled like lavender and laminate floors. I sat in a chair by the window clutching a bottle of water I didn't drink and tried to slow my breathing. At 2:59 they walked in together. My dad looked older. His shoulders sagged beneath a jacket I had bought him for his birthday 2 years ago. My mom's eyes were puffy mascara slightly smudged. Kyle wouldn't meet my gaze. The therapist, Dr. Winters, greeted us all and ushered us into the session room, a modest space with a round table and soft chairs that somehow made it harder to build walls. No interrupting, Dr. Winters began. No dismissing feelings. Absolute honesty. This isn't about blame. This is about understanding. I nodded. So did they. I spoke first. My voice was steady even as my hands trembled in my lap. I invested in Maddox & Co. because I believed in all of you. I wanted to build something that would give us more than a restaurant. I wanted us to be a team, a unit. And for a while, I thought we were. But over time, I was pushed out. Not because of anything I did, but because someone who barely knew me decided I wasn't convenient to keep around. And you all let her. I paused to breathe. My mother wept silently. My dad stared at the floor. Kyle's jaw was clenched so tight I thought he might crack a tooth. What hurt wasn't just being excluded, I continued. It was how easy it was for you to exclude me. How little resistance there was. How I had to find out about things through social media or staff whispers. You celebrated a milestone without me. You planned a second location without me. And in the end, you told me in no uncertain terms that someone's temporary discomfort mattered more than my permanent place in this family. When I finished, the silence was thick enough to drown in. Then my father spoke. His voice was rough, like it had been dragged through gravel. There's nothing I can say to make that okay, he admitted. We got caught up in the excitement, in Kyle finally finding someone he clicked with. We didn't want to rock the boat. And in trying to keep the peace, we broke you instead. My mother nodded, wiping tears. When Amanda said she felt judged by you, I should have known better. I should have questioned it. But I didn't. And by the time I realized what she was doing, the damage had already been done. She turned toward me fully, her eyes red. I'm sorry, Lauren, for the text, for everything, for making you feel disposable. Kyle spoke last. I wanted to believe Amanda loved me, he said. And when she started getting more involved in the restaurant, it felt good, like I finally had something that was mine. And when she didn't like you, I convinced myself you were the problem, because it was easier than confronting what I already knew, that she wasn't right for any of us. Especially me. His voice cracked. You were right about her. You always were. I just couldn't see it. I didn't cry, not then. Because this wasn't about catharsis. It was about consequence. About whether the people who hurt me could really see the pain they'd caused, and whether they were willing to rebuild something new instead of pretending the old version hadn't crumbled. Dr. Winters let the silence linger before asking gently, Lauren, what would rebuilding look like to you? I took a breath. Boundaries. Respect. No more secrets or assumptions. No more treating me like a threat for holding people accountable. And no more sacrifices in the name of family if they only go one way. They all nodded. For the first time in months, it didn't feel performative. It felt real. Our time ended soon after, but not before Dr. Winters suggested we meet weekly for at least the next 2 months. We agreed. No one hugged. No one forced a moment. But as we walked out, my dad touched my shoulder gently and said, Thank you for coming. And I realized something. This wasn't about going back to what we were. It was about choosing what we could be if we all did the work. The weeks that followed weren't magical. They weren't some Hallmark movie montage where wounds healed over shared meals and tears turned into laughter. They were awkward, raw, uncomfortable, but they were real. Every Thursday at 4:00 p.m., we gathered in that small room with Dr. Winters. We took turns, we listened, we argued, and for the first time in a long time, we told the truth. Kyle admitted he had long felt like he was standing in my shadow, that no matter what he did, he believed he'd never measure up. "I wasn't jealous of your success," he said in our third session. "I was ashamed of my own lack of direction. Amanda, she made me feel like I didn't have to compete anymore, like I had something that was mine. I understood that more than I wanted to. I'd spent years overachieving not just for myself, but to make up for the guilt of being the shining star. And it had backfired. My dad admitted that my financial contribution had made him uncomfortable, that he'd felt like he'd lost his place as provider, that my ability to solve problems with money made him feel obsolete. Every time I saw you handle something the restaurant needed," he said quietly, "I was proud, but I also felt small. Even Mom confessed something that made me blink, that she feared my independence meant I'd eventually leave them behind. I know it's irrational," she said through tears, "but when you paid off the mortgage and helped us open Maddox & Co., I had this voice in my head whispering, she's doing all this because she's getting ready to leave us. Like it was some final gift before goodbye. I never knew they carried those insecurities, because they never told me. And I, in my drive to fix everything, never asked. It didn't excuse the betrayal, but it explained the cracks Amanda had so easily slipped between. She hadn't just caused the fracture, she had exploited one that already existed. Dr. Winters helped us unpack it all week by week, and gradually something resembling trust began to form again. Not blind trust, not the kind you're born into and assume is eternal, but a cautious, earned trust built on hard truths and harder conversations. One of the biggest boundaries I established was this: I would never again invest financially in anything tied to our family. I can offer advice, guidance, referrals, I told them. But the money, that's off the table. Permanently. They nodded. No pushback. No guilt trips. They accepted it. That was new. About 2 months in, they invited me over for Sunday dinner. Not at the restaurant. At their home. The one I grew up in. I almost said no, but Dr. Winters encouraged me to try to test the new dynamic in a safe setting. So I went. The house smelled like roasted garlic and tomato sauce. The table was set simply. My mom made lasagna using my grandmother's original recipe, no deconstruction, no garnish, no Amanda reinventions. We ate quietly at first, unsure of the rhythm. But then Kyle told a story about how I once rigged our school vending machine to drop 2 sodas for the price of 1, and we all laughed, real, unguarded laughter. There were still moments of tension, still silences that stretched a little too long, but also warmth, familiarity. Not the naive kind I used to believe in, but something more grounded, more honest. That night I sat in my car afterward and cried. Not because everything was fixed, but because I finally saw a version of us that might work not based on obligation or history, but on who we were now. Meanwhile, Maddox & Coers was surviving. Not thriving, but stable. They had scaled back operations, closing for lunch service and 2 weekdays. Kyle was taking restaurant management courses at a local community college. My dad had finally implemented an inventory system. My mom, though, still nervous, was managing payroll on her own. Each month a settlement check arrived on time. Each one was a quiet acknowledgement of what had been broken and a step toward something better. But the biggest surprise came one Monday morning, exactly 1 year to the day since I received that text message. I was at my desk when I got a call from Chef Ray. "You might want to stop by," he said cryptically. I hesitated, then curiosity won. When I arrived, the restaurant looked different. Not the layout or decor, those were unchanged, but something in the energy. Calmer, lighter. At my usual table, my mother was waiting. She stood when she saw me, in her hands a manila folder. "I know it doesn't erase anything," she said, but I wanted you to have this. Inside were reprints of all 101 receipts I had deleted from our shared system. Camille had the originals, of course, but these were symbolic. A record of everything I had given. A way of saying, we remember. I swallowed hard. Thank you, I whispered. No, she said, eyes shining. Thank you. About a month after that unexpected visit to the restaurant, something shifted inside me. Not dramatically, quietly. Like the first warm breeze at the end of winter, subtle but undeniable. I stopped checking their social media for signs of passive-aggressive jabs or curated photos meant to showcase their new normal. I no longer felt a rush of anxiety when I saw the name Kyle pop up on my phone. I stopped expecting an apology that would fix everything, and in its place, something softer bloomed, a strange, tentative kind of peace. But that didn't mean everything was resolved. At our next family therapy session, I asked for something difficult to talk in depth about the night of the engagement dinner. I needed them to understand that the wound wasn't just about exclusion, it was about being erased. Deliberately. Dr. Winters nodded and gave me the floor. When you chose to go ahead with that dinner knowing I wasn't welcome, I began. You weren't just siding with Amanda. You were making a statement that I was optional, that my years of support could be discarded over someone else's feelings. Kyle looked stricken. I thought you'd get over it, he said softly. That it was just one night. To you, I said gently but firmly. It was one night. To me, it was the moment I realized I was no longer part of this family, not in the way I thought I was. My mom spoke next. I kept thinking, we'll talk later. We'll make it up to her. But the longer we waited, the harder it became to reach out without facing what we'd done. Dr. Winters nodded. Avoidance is a common response to guilt, she said. But Lauren wasn't avoiding you. She was waiting. Hoping. I could see the realization land on their faces like a weight. My dad added something I didn't expect. I assumed you'd understand. That you were strong enough to just let it go. He paused. I didn't realize we'd taken your strength for granted. That line stuck with me, because that's what it had been in so many ways, a constant assumption that I'd be the one to bend, to accommodate, to stay silent. Because I always had. But strength without boundaries isn't resilience. It's erosion. I told them as much. And to their credit, they didn't argue. They listened. That night, as we walked out of therapy, Kyle caught up to me in the parking lot. I know I can't undo what I said. What I didn't say. But I want to try. I want to be your brother again. Not just in name, but in action. I nodded. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a step. In the following weeks, we started texting casually. Nothing deep, just check-ins, jokes, the occasional meme. It was clumsy, but it was honest. Then came his invitation. I'm helping a new restaurant group launch a bistro in Brookline. They asked me to manage. I want you to come to the soft opening, just as a guest. Not as a consultant, not as an investor, just as his sister. I said yes. The restaurant was beautiful. Small, intimate, with warm lighting and a menu that made my mouth water. Kyle greeted me at the door in a crisp white button-down, looking more grown-up than I'd ever seen him. He didn't try to impress me with titles or responsibilities. He just asked me how I was, told me the calamari was better than the pasta, and asked if I wanted to sit with him during his break. We talked for 20 minutes. And for the first time in over a year, it felt simple. No tension, no past looming in every sentence. Just two people who once built blanket forts in the living room, sitting at a small table and trying sincerely to build something new. Afterward, I got in my car and stared out at the night sky. The stars were faint above the city lights, but they were there. Constant, distant, familiar. I thought about everything I'd lost. But I also thought about what I'd found. My voice, my worth, my limits. The realization settled gently. Maybe this wasn't about being welcomed back into the family. Maybe it was about choosing the parts of it I wanted to keep and letting go of the rest. A few weeks after the soft opening in Brookline, I found myself standing outside Maddox & Co.'s again. I hadn't planned to go back, not yet, maybe, not ever, but something pulled me there that afternoon. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the way my mom's note with the reprinted receipts had stayed tucked in my desk drawer, unread, but never thrown away. Maybe it was just time. I stood across the street for a few minutes before crossing. The restaurant looked almost the same. The painted signage I designed still hung above the door. The hanging plants I had insisted on even when Mom thought they were too much maintenance were thriving. I took a breath and stepped inside. The place was quieter than I remembered. Lunchtime had passed and there were only a few lingering tables, most of them older couples sipping coffee and talking quietly. My mother was at the host stand. She looked up and froze. "Hi, Lauren," she said softly, almost reverently. "Hi," I said. "I won't stay long. I just wanted to see it once." She didn't cry. She didn't rush over. Instead, she nodded with gratitude, as if even this small step was more than she thought she'd get. "Your usual table is open," she said. "But if you'd rather sit by the window..." I smiled faintly. "Window's good." As I sat, a waitress I didn't recognize brought me a menu. It was smaller than before, simpler. But then my eyes landed on something that stopped me cold. Nonna's classic lasagna, original recipe. Still there. Still mine. When my mom came back over a few minutes later, I asked quietly, "You kept the lasagna?" She nodded, her voice catching. "We tried taking it off once. Customers complained for a month, said it didn't feel like Maddox & Co. without it. I ordered it, of course. And when it arrived, bubbling, fragrant, perfectly crisp at the edges, I took a bite and closed my eyes. It tasted like home, not the home I had to leave, but the one I had carried with me in memory and in muscle for so long. My mom sat down across from me, uninvited but not unwelcome. We didn't talk about the past, not right away. Instead, we talked about the restaurant, how they'd cut lunch service and now only focused on dinners and weekends, how they'd finally gotten their invoicing system under control, how Kyle had actually hired a business coach and was learning things he never would have learned from me, because sometimes people need to stumble through the lessons themselves. I listened. I asked a few questions. I didn't offer solutions. That was new for me. When we were done eating, she said, "You know, we say you left us, but the truth is we pushed you out." I didn't reply. I just looked at her. "I'm not asking for everything to go back," she continued. "I know it can't, but I'd like to know you again. Not as the fixer, not as the investor, just as my daughter." There it was. The thing I'd longed to hear even when I told myself I didn't need it anymore. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. When I left that day, I walked past the kitchen and saw Chef Ray. He smiled, gave me a small wave, and mouthed, "Good to see you." I nodded back. Outside, the air was crisp and carried the scent of fresh basil and tomato like it always did near the restaurant. I paused for a moment on the sidewalk, soaking it in. I still wasn't sure what would happen next, how close I wanted to get, how much space I still needed. But I knew this much. I had already reclaimed the most important thing. Not the money, not the business, but my self-worth. And no one, not Amanda, not Kyle, not even my parents, could ever put a price tag on that again. The emotional progress was steady but never linear. There were weeks when the idea of sitting at a table with my parents still made my chest tighten. Other times, Kyle would send me a photo from his new job, him smiling beside a chalkboard menu, or a happy couple celebrating an anniversary, and I'd feel something like pride, then guilt, then grief. It turns out that healing isn't a straight road. It's a winding mountain pass filled with detours and blind curves and the occasional landslide. But with every turn, I saw more of who I was becoming: someone grounded, someone aware, someone no longer trying to buy her place at anyone's table. One rainy afternoon, Dr. Winters asked me a question I hadn't prepared for. If your parents and Kyle vanished tomorrow, no chance at reconciliation, no more dinners, no more conversations, would you still be at peace with what you chose to do? I sat in silence for a full minute. Then I nodded. "Yes," I said, Because I chose myself. For the first time in my life, I chose me. And it was true. That didn't mean I didn't want them in my life. It just meant I finally accepted I didn't need them to be whole. My identity wasn't tied to their approval anymore. It was rooted in clarity, in boundaries, in truth. That same week, Kyle reached out with something unexpected. "The new owners of Maddox & Coer want to feature you," he texted. "They're doing a legacy wall to honor how the place got started. They asked if you'd be open to writing a letter or a note they can frame." I stared at the message for a long time. In another life, I might have said no, out of spite, out of self-protection. But something in me had shifted. I didn't want to rewrite the past, but I did want to reshape its meaning. So I said yes. And a week later, I delivered a short letter to Kyle in a cream-colored envelope. Maddox & Coers was built on more than recipes. It was built on memories. On nights when rent was due but we still cooked together. On laughter that echoed down hallways. On the belief that food is love and family when it works, is the most sacred ingredient. Whatever the future holds, I hope this restaurant continues to nourish more than stomachs. I hope it reminds people of home, of hope, and of second chances. Kyle didn't say anything when I handed it to him, but when I walked away he called out, "Thank you, Lauren." "Really?" I nodded. That weekend, I met up with Melissa, my old college roommate who had seen me through the worst of it. We drank wine on her patio and watched her twins chase fireflies across the lawn. "You seem lighter," she said, pouring me another glass. "I am," I replied. "Not because everything's fixed, but because I stopped needing it to be." That night, as I drove home with the windows cracked and the warm summer air rushing in, I thought about all the things I had lost over the last year. My place in a business I helped build, the blind trust I had in my family, the illusion that love always equals loyalty. But I also thought about what I had gained. A business that now thrived under my full attention. A deeper understanding of myself. Real friendships. Emotional autonomy. And the power to say no, and mean it. And slowly, I began to make peace with the idea that maybe my family and I would never go back to what we were. Maybe that was a gift, because now whatever we were building, it would be built on truth. Not obligation, not guilt, not silence, but honesty, and I could live with that. By autumn, the air had shifted cool and crisp like a clean slate. The kind of air that whispers change is not just coming, it's already here. And for once, I didn't dread it. I welcomed it. That October, I was invited to a charity dinner hosted by one of my firm's biggest clients. It was at a high-end venue downtown filled with entrepreneurs, investors, and professionals I used to study from afar when I first started my business. Now I was one of them, a keynote speaker no less. After my talk, which focused on sustainable growth and personal boundaries in business, a woman approached me near the wine bar. "I just wanted to say," she said, smiling, "that thing you said about boundaries not being walls but gates, it hit me. I needed to hear that." I thanked her and we chatted a bit about work. About life, about how women in business often feel the unspoken pressure to overcompensate, not just for themselves, but for everyone around them. And then she asked the question that always comes. "So what inspired you to start your consulting firm?" I paused. I thought about saying something polished and professional, something about market gaps and vision statements. But instead I said, "I started it because I needed to build something that belonged to me. Something no one could take away." She nodded like she understood more than she let on. Later that night, I sat in my car and reflected on how far I'd come. Not just in business, but in life. A year ago, I was measuring my worth in terms of how much I could give. Now I measured it in how well I could stand in my own truth, even when it was uncomfortable. That truth had guided every decision I made over the past 12 months. Walking away from the restaurant I had built. Holding my family accountable without cruelty, letting go of people who only loved me when I was convenient. Saying no to returning as a consultant even when it was offered, choosing peace over proximity. I still saw my family but differently now. with boundaries, with mutual respect. No more assumptions, no more blurred lines. We were learning how to coexist, not as people stuck in roles assigned to us, but as adults, trying sometimes clumsily to reconnect. There were still hard moments. Sometimes I'd catch my mom staring at me too long, like she was measuring time lost. Sometimes Kyle would hesitate before sharing news with me, as if still unsure where our line had been redrawn. But these moments were honest, and that honesty was more valuable than any fake harmony we'd once performed for the sake of appearances. On the 1-year anniversary of the infamous text, the one that had read "You weren't invited to dinner," "Kyle's girlfriend doesn't like you," I marked the moment quietly. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't even reread the archived screenshots. Instead, I opened the family folder on my desktop, the one where I had stored all the legal paperwork, the original contracts, the receipts. And I renamed it Closure. Then I closed it. Not deleted, not forgotten, but finished. I made lasagna that night using my grandmother's recipe. Not for anyone else, just for me. I poured a glass of wine curled up by the window and watched the leaves fall in the soft light of the street lamps. I wasn't waiting for a phone call. I wasn't hoping for a knock on the door. I was full. Content. Home, not the place they let me in or left me out, but the place I built inside myself. Winter came early that year. The first snow dusted the city just after Thanksgiving, clinging to rooftops and power lines like powdered sugar. It reminded me of all the winters before, the ones where we'd gather around my parents' fireplace, mugs of hot cocoa in hand, laughing over old family movies and Kyle's terrible Christmas sweaters. Except this time, I wasn't there, and I didn't expect to be. But then on the first Sunday of December, something unusual happened. I received a letter, not a text, not an email. A real handwritten letter in an envelope bearing my father's handwriting, the same slightly slanted script I recognized from childhood lunchbox notes and birthday cards. Inside on thick paper were just a few sentences. "We'd like to invite you to dinner. No expectations, no strings. Just a seat at the table if you want it. We're learning slowly, and we hope you'll let us keep trying." I held the note in my hands for a long time, unsure of how to feel. The invitation wasn't dramatic. It wasn't begging. It was simple, honest, and maybe finally appropriate. I didn't answer right away. I let it sit on my nightstand for 3 days, rereading it every morning, letting it settle. On the 4th day, I texted my mom. "Okay, I'll come, but only as myself." She replied with a heart emoji. No guilt, no over-explanation. Just quiet acceptance. That Friday evening, I walked up the steps of my parents' home, the same home where I'd once felt completely known and later utterly erased. Kyle opened the door. He looked surprised. Not because I came, but because for the first time I didn't look afraid. "Hey," he said, stepping aside. "Hey," I replied. Inside the house looked just as I remembered, warm, lived in, cluttered in the charming way only family homes are. The table was set for 4. A lasagna baked in the oven. The smell hit me first, basil, garlic, toasted cheese, and it pulled something deep from within me. Not longing, not pain, just memory. We ate slowly, conversation light. Nothing heavy. No talk of Amanda. No talk of the business. Just shared stories of neighbors, of holiday decorations, of Kyle's attempt to bake a pie that exploded in the oven. It wasn't perfect, but it wasn't performative either. After dinner, my dad brought out a small box. He placed it on the table in front of me without saying a word. Inside was a framed photo. Me, Kyle, Mom, Dad, taken outside Maddox and Cohen's the day of our grand opening. I remembered that moment vividly. The pride, the optimism, the sense of unity. But what struck me now was something else. The caption written in my father's careful script placed just beneath the photo. "The day we started. The day we forgot. The day we remember again." No grand speeches, no asking for forgiveness. Just a reckoning, an acknowledgement that something had been lost. And maybe something was being rebuilt. I didn't cry. I didn't say much. I just nodded. "Thank you," I whispered. When I left that night, my mom hugged me at the door, the kind of hug that's cautious and grateful at once. She didn't ask if we were okay. She didn't beg me to come back again soon. She just said, "I hope this is a beginning." And I replied, "Maybe it is." That night, as I walked through the snow-covered streets, hands tucked into my coat pockets, I realized something. Sometimes closure isn't a slammed door or a dramatic goodbye. Sometimes it's a quiet dinner, a folded letter, a framed photo with a truth you were waiting years to hear. Sometimes it's just the chance to come home, not as the person they expected you to be, but as the person you fought like hell to become. The holidays came and went more gently than I expected. There were no grand reunions, no teary speeches, no dramatic forgiveness under twinkling lights. Just quiet moments. Invitations that I could accept or decline without pressure. A text from Kyle on Christmas morning with a photo of him holding our old dog in a red sweater. A New Year's card from my mom, not handwritten but not mass-produced either. Small things, thoughtful things, and that was enough. One Saturday in January, I returned to Maddox and Conan for the first time since that brief lunch. Not for a meeting, not for closure, just to eat. I made a reservation like everyone else. I used my full name, didn't request my old table, didn't call ahead. I wanted to experience the restaurant not as its co-founder or its former investor, but as a customer. As someone who once poured their soul into something and now could step back and simply witness it. The host didn't recognize me, a young guy maybe knew. He smiled warmly and led me to a booth near the back. The restaurant had changed. Fewer tables, simpler decor, a smaller menu. But it had heart. The lasagna was still there. And when it arrived at my table, hot, gooey, rich with memory, I took one bite and felt something I hadn't in a long time. Pride. Not just in what I had built, but in who I had become after walking away from it. That afternoon, I left a generous tip, wrote a kind review, and walked out without looking back. I didn't need to be seen or acknowledged or thanked. The act of reclaiming my place, even quietly, had already done the work. Back home, I pulled up a journal I hadn't touched in months. I flipped to a blank page and wrote, "You can give your all and still not be chosen. But that doesn't mean you weren't worthy. It just means their vision was too small to hold the fullness of your worth." I closed the journal, set it aside, and made myself a cup of tea. Later that evening, I received a message from my mother. "I know you came in today. I didn't want to intrude. I just hope you know. We're trying, even if it's slow." I smiled. "I know," I replied. I no longer needed to be in control of their process. I no longer needed to be the architect of their growth. What I had control over, what I had reclaimed, was myself, my peace, my voice. And as I stood in my kitchen that night, sipping my tea and watching the snow fall softly outside the window, I realized something I wish I had known a long time ago. It's not your job to keep the family together at the cost of your own wholeness. You can step away. You can set boundaries. You can say, "This is enough," and still be loving. Still be kind. Still be strong. And sometimes that's exactly what love demands. Looking back now, I don't regret any of it. Not the $10,000 I'll never fully get back. Not the countless nights spent crafting the brand, training staff, writing menus, building a dream from the ground up. Not even the heartbreak that followed, because it taught me something no textbook or boardroom ever could. It taught me that belonging isn't something you earn by overextending. It isn't granted by sacrifice or sealed by shared blood. True belonging is where you are seen, wholly, honestly, and still accepted. For a long time, I thought I had to prove my worth to keep my family intact. That if I just did more, gave more, fixed more, they'd value me. But in chasing their validation, I lost sight of something sacred, my own voice. This past year, I found it again. In long walks alone on winter mornings, in slow dinners with true friends who never once made me prove myself. In therapy sessions where I finally said things I had kept buried for decades. In quiet moments of joy that belonged to no one else but me. And in those moments, I rebuilt something stronger than any restaurant, stronger than any bond forged through guilt. I rebuilt myself. If you're listening to this, maybe standing at your own crossroads, maybe grieving your own exclusion, let me offer this. You do not need to buy your way into love. You do not need to shrink to keep the peace. You are already enough. And if the people around you can't see that it's not your job to convince them, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for everyone, including yourself, is to walk away, build something new, and wait patiently for those who are willing to meet you where you truly are.